To begin with, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba met with the head of the European Union's diplomacy, Josep Borrell, in Brussels on August 29th, today. They discussed Ukraine's steps toward EU membership, the Second Peace Summit, and pressure on Russia. What conclusions can you draw for yourself? And after this meeting, can we expect our allies to approve a new policy of support for Ukraine? And if so, what kind of policy? I'm not talking about approving a new policy yet, because this is a meeting with the executive branch of Brussels, i.e. the Brussels European bureaucracy. So, most likely, we are not talking about a new framework, but about the implementation of the existing one. Mr. Borrell will soon be stepping down from his post, but he is an iconic figure and our constant friend, partner, and lobbyist for Ukraine within the European institution. It is clear what he has already emphasized, that it will work to fulfill all obligations to supply air defense systems, which are delayed both in time and quantity. There is also the issue of authorizing strikes against Russia. Mr. Borrell may see this as a certain high note of his diplomacy and consider it a matter of honor to achieve such a decision in European institutions with European states, using their mechanisms and authority to make such a decision. In addition, this is the identification of Ukraine's European integration, where all the plans are laid out. At the moment, I am mostly on the side of Ukraine, as we are working on the fundamentals, i.e. the primary and fundamental principles of the European integration process. Then we will move on to sectoral areas, where we will have more detailed negotiations on frameworks, trade standards, and other issues. Departing from the foundation of values and principles that need to be implemented in the regulatory and institutional framework in Ukraine. I don't expect any breakthroughs from this meeting. Rather, it's a positive sign that things are progressing as planned. It's also a good opportunity to gain momentum on key issues related to the EU's security policy. Mr. Oleg, so far we have not seen anything breakthrough in terms of policy from the UK. Decathlon published an article with the headline that as long as Biden is in power, there is unlikely to be an authorization for strikes on Russia. Despite loud statements of support for Ukraine, the new UK government, as we have seen, is less decisive in practice on this issue than its predecessor. The newspaper reported that since Keir Starmer took office, the UK government has worked to maintain the impression of unwavering support for Ukraine. However, recent criticisms from the Ukrainian president suggest Kyiv is concerned about perceived British passivity. Why, in your view, are Ukraine's European partners not pressuring the US to lift its reservations about strikes on the aggressor's territory, particularly regarding the UK? Or is it possible that we do not know about this, and the UK is meanwhile lobbying this issue in circles with colleagues from the White House? Let's face it, there are a few circumstances that are slowing down the increase in assistance to Ukraine, and the UK remains one of the leaders of the coalition of the Resolute. But there has indeed been a change of government, and a historic change of government, because the political teams have changed, not just spot or cosmetic changes. The new ministers in cabinet are still acclimating, so no drastic actions were expected right away. There is some inertia, so no decisive steps should be expected until things are fully underway. The second point is the position of the United States. The British-American alliance is as follows: that you can't just do what you want if it goes against the interests of your allies. Plans need coordination. The strikes against Russia are due to U.S. reluctance, not Britain's, which is constrained by alliance commitments. Therefore, looking at the first point, until the new government has fully come into its own and launched its initiatives, such risks or the creation of some kind of multi-level complex game to stimulate or forcing the United States to accept such a reality, they will not go away. The third point is that non-public dialogues remain unknown to us, and not a public refusal to cooperate, which exists anyway. It is obvious that Ukrainian-British relations are not slowing down, but rather increasing. It is likely that there are certain things that remain non-public, where this cooperation finds new points and new angles of view that strengthen Ukrainian defense and military capabilities. For instance, the British presence, despite not having F-16s, played a significant role in ensuring the planes reached Ukraine and in providing necessary support. Other countries in the coalition are also taking necessary steps. As long as American policy limits European autonomy, we shouldn't expect any European country to act independently until the U.S. position evolves. We have already had tank, airplane, and artillery coalitions. We have seen how they worked, how the glass ceiling was broken. We have seen it before. As an actual repeated technology with strikes against Russia, exactly the same thing is happening now. And we are looking not only at Britain, but also at the Scandinavian countries and Central European countries. It's a broad game, a passing game between many actors in which Britain has a role, but they will definitely not privatize all public capital from this, because they have a specific, very close allied relationship with the United States, and they cannot take such a step without the approval and without the position of the Ukrainian ally. Mr. Oleh, no progress has been made in discussing ways to end the war, from the United States and Britain to China and the U.S. U.S. National Security Advisor Jack Sullivan announced after meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping on August 29th that no specific diplomatic plan for Ukraine was reached. This was due to the U.S.'s principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, although some attempts were made.
Значною мірою через те, що США суворо дотримуються простого принципу нічого про Україну без України. Але, як я розумію, якісь намагання все ж таки...
How would you assess this meeting between Sullivan and Xi Jinping?
Зустріч Салівана і Сі Цзіньпіна.
This meeting is preparing for a potential Xi Jinping-Biden summit, including the agenda and topics. Although Biden hasn't confirmed, there is a desire for another meeting before his term ends. The second point, it is obvious that the Chinese side, there were some proposals, to negotiate for two, and thus reduce the role and subjectivity of Russia and neglect the subjectivity of Ukraine. And the United States did not go for it. The fact that Sullivan is saying this publicly means that such a process was indeed initiated but did not take place. There is a risk that it could come out in the public space and be used against the United States and Ukraine. Sullivan clarified that these initiatives haven't progressed, likely to avoid irritating Russia, and show that discussions about China are not happening behind their backs, focusing solely on Ukraine. Let's not forget that there are also risks to Russia here. And the third point, it is obvious that no agreement was reached on other issues. If this had been achieved, the wording would have been much more cautious, and perhaps the information would have been released differently to the public. The direct statement of such a thing demonstrates the lack of trust between China and the United States. If you have to bring a sensitive issue into the public domain so that it does not become a weakness, it shows a lack of trust that it will not be used against you, even the fact that the issue was raised. So I think that this visit did not contain anything breakthrough or earth-shattering, and it is likely that it did not bring China and the United States closer to a meeting of leaders. Mr. Oleh, we should also mention Turkey in the context of the fact that this country may want to end the war in Ukraine and may have a formula for doing so. Why am I talking about Turkey? Because there was also an article from the Atlantic Council. According to this publication, the war in Ukraine could affect the regional landscape, and this is critical for neighboring Turkey. Therefore, it will contribute to the formation of a ceasefire and post-war agreement. Turkey seems to be able to develop a plan that will meet the interests of the United States regarding the future of the Black Sea region, based on its balancing act and willingness to compromise in peace talks. Do you think Turkey has the tools to prevent further escalation from Russia, given its ability to deter Russia in Libya and Syria, and position itself as a country that can offer a way out of the war? We have repeatedly mentioned Turkey in the context of its ability to influence the aggressor country Russia. However, we have now forgotten about it a bit in terms of information. And now this article appears, so we would like to hear your opinion. They can and do offer it, and Turkey does have it. At the very least, a prototype of a plan that was actively being felt in Washington offices. It started at the equator of summer, about 2 months ago. Turkey has already demonstrated such ambitions behind closed doors through its representatives. These are insights from Washington, so to speak. But do they have the ability to achieve this? No. They do not have enough resources to influence either Russia or Ukraine to force them to do anything. And the resources they do have can only be used as a package. Therefore, we are talking about the possibility of a coordinated plan with the United States. In this case, Turkey could be a junior partner for the United States to play a role in pushing for a peacekeeping process or a diplomatic end to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Turkey has good ties with China, and thus can play this card. At least that's what Turkey hopes for. But we see that the United States does not have enough mechanisms to coerce Ukraine and is not ready to use all its mechanisms to coerce Russia. Accordingly, we have a de facto situation in which there is no space for Turkey to prove itself. And if this space existed, Turkey would have already shown itself. If this space is not created, Turkey will not have the opportunity. And if the space appears, Turkey will not be needed, because it will mean that one of the parties is already in a situation of fixing a bad scenario for itself in the face of a catastrophic one. Then Turkey will join the process after the fact, because it has all the necessary regional and geopolitical tools to try to join and become part of a constructive process. But it is not Turkey that encourages it, and it is not Turkey that can launch it. In other words, without Turkey, the negotiation process as imagined today is indeed impossible, but it is also impossible with Turkey, because there is no space for it. If there is space, then Turkey will be an optional element. So I would treat this very calmly. Once again, we have been probing this topic for many months.